The internet has been losing its mind ever since photos leaked of Kirk Frost and Jasmine Washington living their best lives on a tropical beach together. Fans can't decide whether it's a Photoshop trick or the biggest betrayal in love and hip-hop history. The pictures show Jasmine laughing in a white swimsuit while Kirk leans in, his hand dangerously close to hers, and the background is no random beach. It's the same private resort in Turks and Caicos where Kirk once renewed his vows with Rasheeda. The symbolism alone has social media spiraling. Within hours, hashtag Kirk and Jasmine was trending, and the Frost family name was back under a storm cloud. Rasheeda, who had just launched her new fashion campaign, reportedly found out about the trip at the same time the rest of us did through the blogs. Insiders say her reaction was explosive. One source claims she threw her phone across the room and yelled, "I'm done protecting him," before locking herself in her glom room for hours. Kirk's camp, on the other hand, is dead silent, and that silence is only making things worse. Some fans are calling it Vacationgate, others are dubbing it the Frost Betrayal Part 2. Twitter threads are filled with zoomed-in screenshots of Kirk's watch reflection, trying to prove Jasmine was there. One commenter wrote, "You can't fake that kind of sunlight or that kind of guilt." The Shade Room posted a side-by-side comparison of Jasmine's nail polish and a hand seen resting on Kirk's shoulder. Within minutes, the comments were full of fire emojis and heartbreak gifs, but the real question burning through every timeline: how did this even happen? Kirk and Rasheeda were supposed to be rebuilding. The couple had been giving interviews about growth, forgiveness, and moving past the Jasmine chapter for good. Meanwhile, Jasmine had been quiet for months, focusing on her son and her brand deals. So what brought them to the same resort, on the same weekend, and looking that comfortable? Coincidence, or something deeper? Now Rasheeda's inner circle is speaking out. Close friend Carly Red reportedly told producers that Rasheeda deserves better than recycled heartbreak. Yandi Smith posted a cryptic story: "Sometimes the past ain't done with you yet." Even Scrappy chimed in during a live, saying, "Man, if Kirk really out there wildin' again, Atlanta gone meltdown." Fans are split, half blaming Kirk, half saying Jasmine knew exactly what she was doing. And as more footage trickles out, snippets of a dinner table, a hand brushing another, a faint voice that sounds like Kirk saying we shouldn't be doing this, it's becoming clear that this story is far from over. Emotions are high, alliances are shifting, and Rasheeda's next move might be the one that changes everything. Because if these rumors are true, this isn't just a scandal. It's a war waiting to happen, and nobody in Atlanta is safe from the fallout. It all started with a leaked clip that hit the internet at 2 in the morning. The video was grainy, shaky, but clear enough to make the world pause. Kirk Frost in a loose white shirt, Jasmine Washington in sunglasses, both walking down a boardwalk lined with palm trees. At first, it looked like just two people on vacation. But then Kirk laughed, leaned close, and Jasmine touched his arm. The crowd online didn't need any more evidence. That single touch turned into a wildfire of rumors. Within an hour, every gossip page had it. Within 6, Rasheeda Frost's name was trending alongside the words betrayal and vacation scandal. The morning after, Atlanta woke up restless. Rasheeda's phone buzzed non-stop. Carly was the first to call, her voice fast and shaky. "Girl, tell me this ain't what it looks like," she said. Rasheeda didn't answer. She just stared at the video over and over, every second feeling like another knife to the heart. She recognized that watch. She remembered buying it for Kirk on his birthday 2 years ago. This can't be happening again, she whispered to herself. But deep down, something told her it was real. By noon, the blogs had already pieced together a timeline. Kirk had claimed he was flying out for a business retreat to the Bahamas. Jasmine, on her Instagram stories, posted a boomerang of ocean waves with the caption, "Peace feels like this." Fans noticed both clips had the same palm trees in the background. One user even matched the shadows on the sand. The internet turned into a detective agency overnight, with everyone playing investigator. "We not dumb," one fan tweeted. That's the same resort Rasheeda and Kirk went to for their anniversary in 2021. While the world was busy connecting dots, Rasheeda was pacing her living room. Her son came downstairs asking why everyone online was talking about their family. She froze. "Don't worry about that, baby," she said softly. But inside, she was falling apart. The last time Jasmine entered their lives, it tore everything to pieces. She had promised herself never to relive that humiliation. She had fought too hard to rebuild her marriage, her brand, her peace. And now, it all seemed to crumble in front of millions. Meanwhile, Kirk was still silent. According to sources, he was trying to reach Rasheeda before she saw the clip. Too late, she had already seen it dozens of times. By the time his name appeared on her phone, she let it ring out. He texted, "It's not what it looks like." She read it and laughed bitterly. "Then what is it, Kirk?" she muttered. "What is it this time?" Back in Turks and Caicos, Jasmine was unaware of the chaos she'd unleashed. She was sitting by the pool, scrolling through comments under her latest post. The Shade Room had already reposted the clip. Half the comments called her a homewrecker. The other half told her she deserved happiness. Her friend Keisha tried to take her phone. "Don't read that mess," she said. But Jasmine couldn't stop. She looked at one comment that said, "She never moved on." She was just waiting for her moment. Hours later, paparazzi photos surfaced. Kirk and Jasmine seen having dinner at a beachfront restaurant, candles flickering, faces too close for comfort. Jasmine laughed with her hand on her glass. Kirk, looking down, avoiding eye contact. The image was enough to shatter any defense. Fans said it was romantic. Critics said it was calculated. Either way, it was undeniable. They were together. Rasheeda's mother called that night. "Baby, don't let them see you break again," she warned. "You're stronger now." But Rasheeda's voice cracked. "Ma, he promised me," she said. "He looked me in my face and swore Jasmine was the past. Now look at this." She hung up before her mother could reply. She went to the closet, grabbed a suitcase, and started throwing clothes inside. "He wants to play. I'll show him how it feels." By the next morning, producers of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta had caught wind. They smelled ratings gold. They called both camps immediately. Kirk ignored their calls. Rasheeda didn't. She said, "If you're gonna show my pain, you better show his too." They promised her control over her narrative. She didn't care about narrative. She cared about revenge. At the airport, a fan spotted Kirk waiting at baggage claim, phone pressed to his ear. "You need to chill," he was saying. "They twisting everything." The fan recorded it, of course, and posted it with the caption, "He sounds nervous as hell." Within minutes, it went viral. Another fan claimed Jasmine had checked out of the resort that morning alone. Reports said she looked shaken, wearing sunglasses indoors, avoiding cameras. But the damage was done. The world had already decided what happened. Rasheeda arrived at her store, pressed her lips together, and faced the cameras outside. "I'm not answering any questions," she said coldly. But her silence said more than any statement could. Inside, she broke down to Carly. "I gave him another chance. I believed he could change." Carly hugged her but couldn't hide her own anger. "He embarrassed you again, sis. He doesn't deserve your tears." That same night, a leaked voicemail surfaced online. It was Kirk's voice, muffled but clear. "Jasmine, we need to talk before this gets worse." Jasmine's soft reply followed. "It's already worse, Kirk." The clip spread like wildfire. Radio stations played it. Blogs dissected every tone. Was it recent? Was it old? Nobody knew, but everyone had opinions. Rasheeda sat in her car, listening to it over and over, her fingers trembling on the steering wheel. "It's already worse," Jasmine's voice echoed. "Yeah," Rasheeda whispered. "You have no idea how worse it's about to get." She opened Instagram, typed a caption, "Funny how peace can turn into war overnight," and hit post. Her followers flooded the comments, begging her not to let this destroy her. But the damage had already settled deep in her chest. As the night deepened, Atlanta's gossip scene was in full meltdown. Live streams, podcasts, and tea pages debated every angle. Was this revenge? Was Kirk relapsing into old habits? Was Jasmine manipulating? The internet has been losing its mind ever since photos leaked of Kirk Frost and Jasmine Washington living their best lives on a tropical beach together. Fans can't decide whether it's a Photoshop trick or the biggest betrayal in love and hip-hop history. The pictures show Jasmine laughing in a white swimsuit while Kirk leans in, his hand dangerously close to hers, and the background is no random beach. It's the same private resort in Turks and Caicos where Kirk once renewed his vows with Rasheeda. The symbolism alone has social media spiraling. Within hours, hashtag Kirk and Jasmine was trending, and the Frost family name was back under a storm cloud. Rasheeda, who had just launched her new fashion campaign, reportedly found out about the trip at the same time the rest of us did through the blogs. Insiders say her reaction was explosive. One source claims she threw her phone across the room and yelled, "I'm done protecting him," before locking herself in her glom room for hours. Kirk's camp, on the other hand, is dead silent, and that silence is only making things worse. Some fans are calling it Vacationgate, others are dubbing it the Frost Betrayal Part 2. Twitter threads are filled with zoomed-in screenshots of Kirk's watch reflection, trying to prove Jasmine was there. One commenter wrote, "You can't fake that kind of sunlight or that kind of guilt." The Shade Room posted a side-by-side comparison of Jasmine's nail polish and a hand scene resting on Kirk's shoulder. Within minutes, the comments were full of fire emojis and heartbreak gifs, but the real question burning through every timeline: how did this even happen? Kirk and Rasheeda were supposed to be rebuilding. The couple had been giving interviews about growth, forgiveness, and moving past the Jasmine chapter for good. Meanwhile, Jasmine had been quiet for months, focusing on her son and her brand deals. So what brought them to the same resort, on the same weekend, and looking that comfortable? Coincidence, or something deeper? Now Rasheeda's inner circle is speaking out. Close friend Carly Red reportedly told producers that Rasheeda deserves better than recycled heartbreak. Yandi Smith posted a cryptic story: "Sometimes the past ain't done with you yet." Even Scrappy chimed in during a live, saying, "Man, if Kirk really out there wildin' again, Atlanta gone meltdown." Fans are split, half blaming Kirk, half saying Jasmine knew exactly what she was doing. And as more footage trickles out, snippets of a dinner table, a hand brushing another, a faint voice that sounds like Kirk saying we shouldn't be doing this, it's becoming clear that this story is far from over. Emotions are high, alliances are shifting, and Rasheeda's next move might be the one that changes everything. Because if these rumors are true, this isn't just a scandal. It's a war waiting to happen, and nobody in Atlanta is safe from the fallout. It all started with a leaked clip that hit the internet at 2 in the morning. The video was grainy, shaky, but clear enough to make the world pause. Kirk Frost in a loose white shirt, Jasmine Washington in sunglasses, both walking down a boardwalk lined with palm trees. At first, it looked like just two people on vacation. But then Kirk laughed, leaned close, and Jasmine touched his arm. The crowd online didn't need any more evidence. That single touch turned into a wildfire of rumors. Within an hour, every gossip page had it. Within 6, Rasheeda Frost's name was trending alongside the words betrayal and vacation scandal. The morning after, Atlanta woke up restless. Rasheeda's phone buzzed nonstop. Carly was the first to call, her voice fast and shaky. "Girl, tell me this ain't what it looks like," she said. Rasheeda didn't answer. She just stared at the video over and over, every second feeling like another knife to the heart. She recognized that watch. She remembered buying it for Kirk on his birthday 2 years ago. This can't be happening again, she whispered to herself. But deep down, something told her it was real. By noon, the blogs had already pieced together a timeline. Kirk had claimed he was flying out for a business retreat to the Bahamas. Jasmine, on her Instagram stories, posted a boomerang of ocean waves with the caption, "Peace feels like this." Fans noticed both clips had the same palm trees in the background. One user even matched the shadows on the sand. The internet turned into a detective agency overnight, with everyone playing investigator. "We not dumb," one fan tweeted. That's the same resort Rasheeda and Kirk went to for their anniversary in 2021. While the world was busy connecting dots, Rasheeda was pacing her living room. Her son came downstairs asking why everyone online was talking about their family. She froze. "Don't worry about that, baby," she said softly. But inside, she was falling apart. The last time Jasmine entered their lives, it tore everything to pieces. She had promised herself never to relive that humiliation. She had fought too hard to rebuild her marriage, her brand, her peace. And now, it all seemed to crumble in front of millions. Meanwhile, Kirk was still silent. According to sources, he was trying to reach Rasheeda before she saw the clip. Too late, she had already seen it dozens of times. By the time his name appeared on her phone, she let it ring out. He texted, "It's not what it looks like." She read it and laughed bitterly. "Then what is it, Kirk?" she muttered. "What is it this time?" Back in Turks and Caicos, Jasmine was unaware of the chaos she'd unleashed. She was sitting by the pool, scrolling through comments under her latest post. The Shade Room had already reposted the clip. Half the comments called her a homewrecker. The other half told her she deserved happiness. Her friend Keisha tried to take her phone. "Don't read that mess," she said. But Jasmine couldn't stop. She looked at one comment that said, "She never moved on. She was just waiting for her moment." Hours later, paparazzi photos surfaced. Kirk and Jasmine seen having dinner at a beachfront restaurant, candles flickering, faces too close for comfort. Jasmine laughed with her hand on her glass. Kirk, looking down, avoiding eye contact. The image was enough to shatter any defense. Fans said it was romantic. Critics said it was calculated. Either way, it was undeniable. They were together. Rasheeda's mother called that night. "Baby, don't let them see you break again," she warned. "You're stronger now." But Rasheeda's voice cracked. "Ma, he promised me," she said. "He looked me in my face and swore Jasmine was the past. Now look at this." She hung up before her mother could reply. She went to the closet, grabbed a suitcase, and started throwing clothes inside. "He wants to play. I'll show him how it feels." By the next morning, producers of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta had caught wind. They smelled ratings gold. They called both camps immediately. Kirk ignored their calls. Rasheeda didn't. She said, "If you're gonna show my pain, you better show his too." They promised her control over her narrative. She didn't care about narrative. She cared about revenge. At the airport, a fan spotted Kirk waiting at baggage claim, phone pressed to his ear. "You need to chill," he was saying. "They twisting everything." The fan recorded it, of course, and posted it with the caption, "He sounds nervous as hell." Within minutes, it went viral. Another fan claimed Jasmine had checked out of the resort that morning alone. Reports said she looked shaken, wearing sunglasses indoors, avoiding cameras. But the damage was done. The world had already decided what happened. Rasheeda arrived at her store, pressed her lips together, and faced the cameras outside. "I'm not answering any questions," she said coldly. But her silence said more than any statement could. Inside, she broke down to Carly. "I gave him another chance. I believed he could change." Carly hugged her but couldn't hide her own anger. "He embarrassed you again, sis. He doesn't deserve your tears." That same night, a leaked voicemail surfaced online. It was Kirk's voice, muffled but clear. "Jasmine, we need to talk before this gets worse." Jasmine's soft reply followed. "It's already worse, Kirk." The clip spread like wildfire. Radio stations played it. Blogs dissected every tone. Was it recent? Was it old? Nobody knew, but everyone had opinions. Rasheeda sat in her car, listening to it over and over, her fingers trembling on the steering wheel. "It's already worse," Jasmine's voice echoed. "Yeah," Rasheeda whispered. "You have no idea how worse it's about to get." She opened Instagram, typed a caption, "Funny how peace can turn into war overnight," and hit post. Her followers flooded the comments, begging her not to let this destroy her. But the damage had already settled deep in her chest. As the night deepened, Atlanta's gossip scene was in full meltdown. Live streams, podcasts, and tea pages debated every angle. Was this revenge? Was Kirk relapsing into old habits? Was Jasmine manipulating? "You told me you still thought about how everything ended." Rasheeda's eyes narrowed. "Oh, so it was about closure and compliments now." Kirk's voice rose. "It wasn't like that, man. I was just being honest. We got history. I was trying to clear the air." Rasheeda's hand slammed the table. "Clear the air? You cleared it on a tropical island while I was home holding down our business, our family, our name." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to make things worse," she whispered. "I thought we were just talking." Rasheeda turned to her. "You always just talking. Funny how every time y'all just talk, my marriage almost dies." The producer motioned for cameras to stay rolling. Nobody dared to breathe. Kirk rubbed his temples. "I made a mistake, okay? I thought I was in control, but I wasn't. I shouldn't have gone. I shouldn't have met her. I'm sorry." Rasheeda stared at him for a long moment. "You said that before," she said flatly. "You said that when the first baby came out. You said that when you lied about the condo. Every apology from you feels like dossier vu." The air was electric, heavy, suffocating. Jasmine finally looked up. "You think I wanted this? You think I like being hated? I didn't call the cameras. I didn't post anything. Y'all act like I started this." Rasheeda shot back. "You didn't stop it either." Jasmine shook her head. "He called me. He said he needed closure. I didn't chase him, he came to me." Kirk's eyes widened. "That's not true," he said quickly. "Don't twist it." Jasmine turned to him. "Then tell her, Kirk. Tell her who texted who first." The room froze again. Kirk hesitated, eyes darting between them. Rasheeda's jaw tightened. "Oh, so you lied again?" she said quietly. Kirk's silence said everything. Jasmine whispered, "You told me she knew about the trip." Rasheeda's hand flew to her mouth, disbelief washing over her face. "You told her what?" Kirk stood up, voice shaking. "I panicked. Okay. I didn't want drama. Rasheeda stood too. You brought the drama, Kirk. You packed it, flew it out, and had dinner with it. Jasmine stood, tears streaking down her face. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I came to tell the truth. I never wanted to ruin your life. Rasheeda took a step closer. You already did. You did that years ago. And the fact that you sitting here crying doesn't make it hurt less. Jasmine wiped her cheeks. Then what do you want from me? You want me to disappear? I already tried that. It didn't stop him from calling. Kirk shouted, Stop. Both of you, stop. But neither woman stopped. Years of resentment and betrayal came spilling out, all at once. Rasheeda's voice trembled but stayed sharp. You don't get to play victim, Jasmine. You knew he was married. Jasmine snapped back, and he knew it too. But he still came back. So, why is it always me who gets blamed? Kirk looked helpless, trapped between two storms. I'm the one to blame, he said softly. Both of y'all right to be mad. I messed up everything. Rasheeda stared at him, her anger giving way to exhaustion. You think admitting it fixes it? She asked. You think I can just keep rebuilding every time you destroy something? Kirk's voice cracked. I love you, Ray. She shook her head. You love the idea of me forgiving you. The silence that followed was unbearable. Jasmine quietly grabbed her purse and whispered, I'm sorry, before walking out. The door clicked shut. The cameras zoomed in on Rasheeda's face, her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. After the shoot, the internet exploded. Fans flooded timelines with clips from the sit-down. This was the most real moment in TV history. One wrote, Rasheeda's strength is unmatched, said another. Some sympathized with Jasmine, calling her a woman caught in the middle of old pain. Others tore her apart. The hashtags, #team, RASHEEDA, and #team Jasmine trended side by side for 3 days. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda stayed silent. She didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't respond. Kirk tried to call her again, but she blocked his number. Mendices and Yandi visited her, bringing wine and comfort. You handled that like a queen, Yandi said. Rasheeda smiled faintly. I'm tired of being strong, she whispered. I just want peace. Mendices said softly. Sometimes peace means walking away. Jasmine, meanwhile, booked a one-way flight to Houston to stay with her cousin. She needed to disappear for a while. She turned off her phone, deleted Instagram, and packed her life into 2 suitcases. As the plane took off, she looked out the window, tears sliding down her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she murmured. Back in Atlanta, Kirk sat alone in the dark. The house felt hollow without Rasheeda's laughter, without the sound of her heels clicking across the floor. He scrolled through old photos, family vacations, anniversaries, behind the scenes, clips from their show. He whispered to himself, how did I let it get this bad? The producers released a teaser for next week's episode. It ended with Rasheeda's voice saying, sometimes the person you build with is the same one who breaks you. The clip sent chills through everyone watching. Fans flooded the comments with support and heartbreak emojis. Kirk turned off the TV, buried his face in his hands, and whispered, maybe I lost her for good this time. The next morning, Rasheeda woke to sunlight streaming through her blinds. For the first time in days, she felt a strange calm. She made herself coffee, opened her journal, and wrote one line. Some endings don't need closure, they need peace. She took a deep breath and decided she wasn't going to let this story define her anymore. But Atlanta wasn't done yet. Paparazzi caught Kirk outside a jewelry store later that day. Rumors flew that he was buying something, maybe an apology gift, maybe another promise ring. Fans debated endlessly, but Rasheeda didn't care. She had already made her choice. She looked in the mirror, fixed her hair, and said quietly, this chapter's mine now. And somewhere across the city, Kirk sat in his car, staring at the box in his hand, wondering if love could ever survive the kind of chaos he created. That night, the city of Atlanta felt louder than usual. Every corner bar and every phone screen carried the same clip, Rasheeda walking out of that sit-down. Head held high, cameras flashing in her face like sparks. She had said almost nothing, but her silence had become a statement. Even the networks replayed it again and again, narrators calling it the most tense 5 minutes in love and hip-hop history. Kirk watched the rerun from his hotel room. The sound was off, but he could read her lips in that final frame when she looked into the camera and said, I'm done. He whispered to himself. She meant that this time. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with whispers. People recognized him. He could feel the eyes following him as he walked out, cap pulled low, hoodie up. One fan yelled, "Yo Kirk, you really messed up man." Another shouted, "Rasheeda deserves better." He didn't answer. He just kept walking to the car, jaw tight, chest heavy. The ride home was silent except for the hum of the tires. His phone kept lighting up producers, media outlets, old friends pretending to care. He turned it face down. Rasheeda, meanwhile, was home sorting through paperwork for her boutique expansion. Work was her armor. Every time her life fell apart, she rebuilt something new. She looked at sketches for her next clothing line and wrote a note in the margin, "Call it reborn." Carly stopped by with takeout and gossip, dropping her purse on the table. "Girl, you know Kirk's name trending #1 again?" Rasheeda didn't look up. "Let it trend." Carly sighed. "He outside somewhere, acting like the world owe him sympathy." Rasheeda finally smiled faintly. "He better hope the world give him something, because I won't." Somewhere across town, Jasmine was unpacking in her cousin's apartment, trying to start fresh. She turned on the TV only to see her own face replayed over and over in trailers and reaction videos. She switched it off, leaning back against the wall. "No matter where I go, they still talking about me," she said quietly. Her cousin shook her head. "You can't control what people say. You just gotta control what you do next." Jasmine nodded, staring at the ceiling. "I'm tired of being the villain in their story. Maybe I need to tell my own." By the weekend, rumors of a possible reunion shoot began to swirl. Fans wanted closure. They demanded a follow-up. The network smelled money. And as always, Kirk was caught in the middle. His publicist urged him to release a statement, something polished, something that might soften the backlash. He refused. "No more statements," he said. "I need to fix this in person." Late that night, he drove back to the Frost house. The driveway lights were still on. He stood outside the door for a long time, rehearsing what he'd say. When he finally knocked, there was no answer. He waited, knocked again. Eventually, Rasheeda opened the door just enough to look at him. "What do you want?" Her voice was low but firm. "To talk," he said. "Too late for that," she replied, and started to close it. "Please," he said quietly, "just give me 5 minutes." She hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat in silence for nearly a minute before Kirk spoke. "I know saying sorry don't fix nothing, but I need you to hear me." Rasheeda didn't respond. He continued, "That night, I wasn't thinking. I thought seeing Jasmine would close a chapter, not reopen it. I thought I was proving to myself I was past it. I was wrong." Rasheeda's hands folded in her lap. "You always think you're proving something," she said softly, "and it always ends with me cleaning up the mess." Kirk nodded. Slowly, "You right, I can't argue that, but I still love you." Rasheeda stood up. "Love without respect is just noise, Kirk. And I can't live in noise anymore." She walked toward the door. He followed, voice cracking. "I can do better." She turned. "You said that the last time, and the time before that. You can't keep rebuilding something that don't have a foundation anymore." He lowered his head. "So that's it." She nodded. "That's it." He lingered a moment, looking around the house that once felt alive. "You know, every corner of this place got you in it," he said. "Even if I leave, it's still gonna be yours." She opened the door wider. "Then leave it with some peace for once." He stepped outside, looking like a man carrying every mistake he ever made. The next morning, Rasheeda met with her team to finalize her fashion event. The press was already calling it her comeback moment. She walked through the venue.com and focused. Reporters shouted questions, asking if Kirk would attend. She smiled politely. No comment. The show went on flawlessly, ending with a standing ovation. Backstage, she exhaled deeply, as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Later that night, she checked her phone. Jasmine had posted a statement, her first in weeks. "I'm not proud of how things turned out, but I won't carry blame that doesn't belong entirely to me. Healing starts when truth does." Comments were brutal, supportive, divided. Kirk's name trended again. At the same time, Kirk sat in his car outside a studio, trying to record a statement of his own. He hit record 3 times, and deleted it each time. Finally, he just spoke. "I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I let pride drive me. I thought being silent was strength. It wasn't, it was cowardice." He posted it. No captions, no tags. The video blew up within an hour. Some fans called it growth. Others called it manipulation. Rasheeda watched it once, then turned off her phone. She wasn't interested in his public redemption. She was building her own quiet one. In the following weeks, she appeared on talk shows, not to talk about Kirk, but to promote her business and her journey of self-worth. Heartbreak doesn't end you, she said during one interview. It reminds you what you deserve. Meanwhile, Jasmine signed a deal with a podcast network to tell her side. Her first episode was titled The Other Woman's Truth. In it, she didn't name names, but everyone knew who she meant. Sometimes people don't realize they carry unfinished chapters with them, she said, and when they finally face them, everyone gets burned. It went viral instantly, reigniting the debate all over again. By month's end, Kirk was rarely seen in public. Reports said he'd checked into therapy and started journaling. Fans mocked him at first, then softened as weeks passed. He stopped posting altogether. Rasheeda, on the other hand, flourished new partnerships, new interviews, new glow. The tabloids called it the rebirth of Rasheeda. One evening, weeks after the chaos, she got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of her and Kirk from years ago, smiling in front of their store. And a note that read, "Thank you for everything. I'm learning." No signature, but she didn't need one. She placed it in a drawer and whispered, "Good." The story might have ended there, but Atlanta never forgets. A gossip page posted a photo one night Rasheeda stepping out of a car with Trey, that same record exec she'd been seen with before. They were laughing, relaxed, glowing. The caption read, "New beginnings look good on her." The comments section erupted with support. "That's the energy we love to see," one wrote. As for Kirk, he watched the clip quietly from his phone, smiled faintly, and said to himself, "She deserves that." And for once, he didn't feel anger, only relief, because maybe the greatest act of love he could offer was letting her be happy without him. And somewhere, Jasmine was recording her next podcast episode, saying, "We don't always get the ending we want, but sometimes we get the one we need." Her voice trembled, but it was steady enough to mean it. That was how the scandal that started with a vacation turned into something bigger, a story of endings, lessons, and the strange peace that comes when the fire finally burns out. A month later, Atlanta was quieter but not silent. Gossip never truly died there. It just shifted shape. Now it wasn't about the betrayal, or the beach, or the tears on camera. It was about what came after. Fans had turned the whole story into a saga, a running legend of heartbreak, redemption, and survival. But for the people who actually lived it, life had already moved in different directions. Rasheeda was busier than ever. Her new clothing line Reborn had sold out its first drop within hours. Magazine covers called her the face of resilience. Stylists, producers, and young women looked up to her as a symbol of composure. But late at night, when the lights went off and the house fell silent, she'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, looking out at the city she'd fought so hard to conquer. Sometimes she'd think about the laughter she used to share with Kirk back when things were simple, before fame and cameras made everything heavier. She didn't miss the chaos. She missed the calm that used to exist before it. One night, she received a call from Carly. "Girl, you sitting down?" Carly asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "You're about to be nominated for Woman of the Year at the Atlanta Influence Awards." Rasheeda smiled faintly. "That's nice." Carly sighed. "Nice. This is huge. You turning pain into power. That's the story." Rasheeda leaned back in her chair. "Yeah, I guess it is," she said softly. Meanwhile, Jasmine's podcast was exploding in popularity. Her honesty drew people in. She talked about regret, loneliness, accountability, the things that didn't trend as easily as drama but hit harder. One episode opened with her saying, "People think healing looks like sunshine, but sometimes it looks like silence." Her voice was calm, reflective, almost serene. For the first time, listeners saw her not as the other woman but as a human being, learning how to start over. But Atlanta still had a way of stirring old ghosts. One afternoon, Jasmine received a message from an unknown number. It read, "You owe her an apology, not for what happened, but for the years she lost." She didn't reply, but the words stayed with her. That night, she wrote a letter. It wasn't long, but it was raw. "I don't expect forgiveness," it read, "but I hope time has softened the anger, because I'm finally trying to be better than who I was." She sealed it in an envelope addressed to our Frost and left it at the front desk of the boutique. She didn't sign her name. When Rasheeda found the letter a few days later, she read it twice. She didn't cry, didn't smile, she just folded it and placed it inside her journal. Then she whispered, "Maybe that's enough." She didn't need revenge anymore. She had peace. Across town, Kirk sat in a small studio, finishing a session with a young artist. He had quietly started managing talent again, staying out of the spotlight. The walls were covered with platinum records from his past, but he barely looked at them anymore. When the artist left, he sat alone, staring at the empty chair across from him. "Funny how I used to think money fixed everything," he muttered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding ring, still shining, still heavy. He held it for a long moment before placing it gently on the mixing console. Later that week, he stopped by the boutique when he knew Rasheeda wasn't there. He just wanted to see the place. It looked different, new colors, new layout, new energy. He bought a small bag, left a note at the register, and walked out quietly. When Rasheeda arrived later, her assistant handed her the note. It said, "You did everything I was too weak to do. Proud of you." No signature, but she knew who wrote it. She smiled faintly. The media kept trying to reignite the scandal, but no one fed it anymore. Bloggers eventually moved on to newer stories, new couples, new breakups, new drama. What stayed was the legend of it all. How Kirk and Jasmine were caught slippin', how Rasheeda lost it, and how, somehow, everyone found themselves again in different ways. One evening, months later, all three of them ended up at the same charity event. It wasn't planned. Rasheeda was presenting an award, Kirk was there with his artist, and Jasmine had been invited by one of the sponsors. The moment was tense when they first locked eyes. Jasmine looked away quickly, but Rasheeda approached her with quiet grace. "Hey," she said softly. Jasmine froze, then managed a small nod. Rasheeda looked her over and said, "You look good." Jasmine's eyes glistened. "So do you." Kirk stood a few feet away, watching, unsure whether to step forward or stay back. He decided to stay still. As Rasheeda turned to leave, Jasmine whispered, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Rasheeda didn't stop walking. She just said over her shoulder, No, it wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close. After the event, Rasheeda drove home alone. She rolled down the window, letting the wind hit her face. She thought about how far she'd come from that night when everything fell apart, the shaking hands, the tears, the broken trust. Now, she felt light. She whispered to herself, "Ain't no way I'm ever going back." The next morning, she posted a new photo, her smiling under a neon sign that read Rebirth. Her caption was simple, "Growth looks good on me." Within minutes, the post blew up. Everyone loved it, shared it, quoted it. Fans said, "This is the closure we needed." But the real closure didn't come from posts or headlines. It came quietly, in small moments like Jasmine deleting the old photos from her phone, or Kirk sitting in church on a Sunday morning for the first time in years, or Rasheeda standing in her store, surrounded by the empire she rebuilt from the ruins. And in that silence, the story that started with betrayal turned into something else entirely, a story about pain that didn't destroy, mistakes that became lessons, and people who finally learned how to live without the chaos. Still, in Atlanta, every time the wind picked up and the city lights glowed just right, people whispered about that one trip, the beach, the laughter, the cameras. "Ain't no way," they'd say, shaking their heads. But deep down, everyone knew it really happened. And maybe that's what made it unforgettable. The night air over Atlanta was thick with humidity, the kind that carried noise across streets and made even the quiet moments feel heavy. Downtown glowed like nothing had ever gone wrong there. But behind all that brightness were the stories people couldn't stop repeating. Everyone remembered the beach clip, the dinner, the argument, the walkouts. But months later, the tone had changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fascination. The Frost Triangle had turned into a kind of myth, something people whispered about like it belonged to another time. Rasheeda hardly paid attention. Her days were long, her nights steady. She filmed new episodes for her spin-off, worked with designers, met stylists, and smiled for cameras without flinching. She had learned how to smile without letting it hurt. Her staff adored her, everybody did. They saw the surface, the confidence, the focus, the composure. What they didn't see was how often she woke up at 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering how forgiveness and exhaustion could feel so similar. She still wore her ring sometimes, not because of hope, but because she liked how it looked with certain outfits. Carly visited one evening, bringing a bottle of champagne. "We celebrating tonight," she said, plopping onto the couch. Rasheeda raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Carly grinned. "You just got named Entrepreneur of the Year." Rasheeda smiled faintly. Again, Carly confirmed. "See your Glope official now." They clinked glasses. Carly hesitated before adding, "You ever think about talking to him again?" Rasheeda paused, swirling her drink. "No," she said after a moment, "but sometimes I think about the silence. It's peaceful, but it's lonely too." Carly nodded. "That's the price of peace, sis. Quiet can get loud." Meanwhile, Kirk was rebuilding something different. The studio was his therapy now. He spent hours mentoring new artists, teaching them about contracts, royalties, everything he once ignored. The younger guys called him Og Frost. He laughed every time he heard it. But inside it reminded him how far he'd fallen from the man he used to be. One night, after the session ended, he sat alone in the control room, watching an old clip on YouTube, him and Rasheeda performing together years ago. They were laughing, playful, unguarded. He smiled at the screen, then whispered, "We really had it." He didn't post anymore, didn't chase interviews. When fans saw him out, they said he looked calmer, maybe tired, maybe wiser. People said therapy was changing him. Maybe it was. He still drove by the boutique sometimes, never going in, just watching from across the street. One evening he saw Rasheeda locking up, laughing with her assistant. She looked free. That image stayed in his head for days. Across town, Jasmine's life had changed too. Her podcast, The Truth Table, was now one of the top in Atlanta. She talked about accountability, womanhood, forgiveness. People admired her honesty. She never mentioned names, but everyone understood the backstory. She had become the voice for women who'd been both wrong and wronged. The irony wasn't lost on her. One afternoon, during a recording, she paused mid-sentence and said quietly, "Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself." Her producer didn't cut the line. It stayed in the final episode and went viral. One morning, Jasmine received a package at the studio. Inside was a note that said, "You sound like you've grown. Keep going," unsigned. But she knew the handwriting. She stared at it for a long time before placing it in her drawer beside her microphone. Time moved the way it always does, too fast for reflection, too slow for healing. Rasheeda's award ceremony arrived in late spring, and Atlanta turned out to celebrate her. The venue sparkled. Cameras flashed, the audience chanted her name. She wore silver, her hair sleek, her smile radiant. When she stepped on stage to accept her award, she paused before speaking. "Life has a way of teaching you through heartbreak," she said. "But if you survive it, you learn the difference between breaking and transforming." The crowd erupted. Among the audience sat Kirk, unannounced. He had slipped in quietly at the back. When she finished her speech, he clapped like everyone else, then left before anyone could see. Outside, he stood under the streetlight, listening to the muffled applause through the walls. He smiled sadly and said to himself, "She finally made it out of my shadow." Later that night, Rasheeda got a message on her phone. It was from a number she hadn't deleted but hadn't used either. The text read, "You spoke the truth tonight. Proud of you." She didn't reply, just stared at the screen until the message faded into the background light. A few weeks later, a reunion special was announced, one that would revisit the franchise's biggest stories. The network begged Rasheeda to appear. She refused at first, but curiosity tugged at her. In the end, she agreed on one condition: no stage drama, no scripts, just closure. When she walked onto the set months later, the audience gasped. Jasmine was already there, seated calmly. Kirk joined moments later. The three of them exchanged small, careful nods. The host asked gentle questions at first. Then came the one everyone waited for. "If you could go back, would you change anything?" Jasmine answered first. "I'd change how I saw myself. I thought taking someone else's piece would give me my own. It didn't." Kirk said quietly, "I'd change the way I treated loyalty. I took it for granted until it left." When it was Rasheeda's turn, she paused, her gaze steady. "I wouldn't change anything," she said. "Pain taught me who I was. Forgiveness taught me who I'm not." The audience fell silent. Even the host looked stunned. Rasheeda turned to Kirk, offered a faint smile, and said, "We good now? Just not us anymore." He nodded, eyes glistening. Jasmine looked down, whispering, "Thank you." When the cameras cut, the three of them shared a quiet moment backstage. No words, just an understanding the storm was over. Jasmine left first, walking into the night with her phone off. Kirk lingered a moment longer, then walked away in the opposite direction. Rasheeda stayed behind, watching the lights dim, feeling lighter than she had in years. In the days that followed, the reunion clip became the most viewed episode in the franchise's history. Not because of yelling or chaos, but because of the stillness, the rare, fragile quiet of people who had finally stopped fighting. Fans said it felt real, like closure wasn't scripted for once. Weeks later, Rasheeda sat on her porch one evening, sipping tea, the sky soft and orange. Carly texted her, "You realize this whole city rooting for you?" She smiled and typed back, "I know, but I'm just rooting for peace." And somewhere far from Atlanta, Jasmine looked at the ocean again, different beach, different story. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Maybe peace was the real ending." The city moved on, but the echoes of that story never left. People still said, "Ain't no way," whenever new drama hit the headlines, using it like a phrase born from memory. And maybe that's what it became, not just a scandal, not just betrayal, but a reminder that even in the messiest stories, some endings find grace instead of fire. It was late summer when Atlanta finally stopped talking about it out loud. The streets had new scandals, new faces, and fresh stories to chew on. But in the quiet corners of the city, people still remembered that old triangle, that beach clip, that headline that once set everything on fire. The words "ain't no way" had become a phrase everyone used for anything unbelievable. They'd forgotten where it came from, but it lingered, like perfume that never fully fades. Rasheeda had moved into a new rhythm of life. The mornings began with music playing low through the kitchen and sunlight spilling across marble counters. Her boutique was thriving. She had opened 2 more locations in different cities. Every now and then, when she saw her reflection in the shop windows, she thought about how far she'd come from that trembling woman sitting in a car, listening to a leaked voicemail. The fear was gone, the confusion too. Only resolve remained. Carly still visited often, bringing gossip, laughter, and a little chaos. One afternoon, as they sorted through new samples, Carly asked, "You ever gonna date again? Or are you done for good?" Rasheeda smiled faintly. "Done with mistakes, not with life." Carly nodded approvingly. "That's the quote right there, girl." They laughed, but the laughter felt easy now, not forced. Elsewhere, Kirk's life had gone quiet. The studio was smaller, the circle tighter. He had learned to like solitude, learned to listen more than talk. The producers who used to chase him for interviews didn't bother anymore. Sometimes he'd see his old photos online and barely recognize the man in them. Every once in a while, he'd get messages from fans saying they missed seeing him and Rasheeda together. He never replied. Instead, he'd whisper, "So do I," and let the moment pass. His son visited one weekend. They sat outside on the porch, the evening calm. "You think Mom ever gonna forgive you?" his son asked. Kirk stared into the distance. "She already did," he said quietly. "She just never said it out loud." Jasmine was living in Houston now, recording her podcast from a small studio with exposed brick walls and candles on the desk. Her voice had changed. It carried something softer, steadier. She had started speaking at women's panels, writing essays about growth and accountability. Her face was no longer attached to scandal headlines but to healing workshops and motivational clips that people shared online with captions like "She really turned it around." One evening after recording, she scrolled through her messages and found one that made her stop. It was from a follower who wrote, "You helped me leave my own toxic story. Thank you." Jasmine sat back, smiling through quiet tears. A few weeks later, the network announced a special retrospective episode titled 10 Years of Atlanta Love and Hip Hop, The Untold Moments. Producers reached out to the original cast for interviews. Surprisingly, Rasheeda agreed. Kirk did too. They filmed their segments separately. When Rasheeda was asked what she remembered most, she said, "The noise. And then the silence that saved me." When Kirk was asked the same, he said, "The moment she stopped yelling. That's when I knew it was really over." When the episode aired, fans flooded social media with nostalgia. Old clips resurfaced: Rasheeda crying backstage, Kirk's awkward explanations, Jasmine's trembling apologies. People posted side-by-side photos showing how much they'd all changed. One comment summed it up perfectly: "They all grew up in front of us." In the final montage, a voiceover from Rasheeda played over shots of Atlanta's skyline at dusk. Sometimes what breaks you isn't punishment, it's preparation. Because once you stop running from truth, you start running toward peace. The city lights shimmered, and the screen faded to black. Months rolled by. One afternoon, while traveling for a fashion event, Rasheeda found herself in an airport lounge scrolling through her phone. She saw a headline: "Former producer Kirk Frost donates to Youth Music Foundation." She smiled to herself. "Good for him," she murmured. For the first time, his name didn't make her flinch. Across the city that same evening, Kirk sat in the studio finishing a session with a young artist. When the kid thanked him, saying, "You really helped me, man," Kirk smiled. "That's what I'm supposed to do now." The words came naturally, like he'd finally found his purpose again. Jasmine watched the same headline that night from her phone in Houston. She smiled too, whispering, "Maybe he really changed." She turned off the screen, looked around her quiet apartment, and breathed in the stillness. By the end of that year, Rasheeda released a book, part memoir, part guide, titled Still Standing. It became a bestseller. Fans filled the comments with praise. She survived everything. She's proof you can rebuild. During her book tour, one interviewer asked, "If you could say one thing to the woman you were back then, what would it be?" Rasheeda thought for a moment, then said, "You're gonna be okay." Not because he'll change, but because you will. And so Atlanta's biggest scandal slowly became its biggest lesson. People stopped calling it a disaster and started calling it a transformation story. Podcasts analyzed it, documentaries replayed it, but nothing captured it like living through it. On a warm evening, a year later, Rasheeda stood outside her store as the city lights blinked on. She looked across the street and thought she saw a familiar figure, a man in a hoodie, standing still, watching. Maybe it was Kirk, maybe it wasn't. She didn't move closer. She just smiled faintly, whispered thank you, and walked back inside. Up above, the Atlanta skyline glowed the same way it did the night everything started. Except this time, there was no chaos, no betrayal, no noise, just peace. And maybe that's how real stories end, not with applause or revenge or even forgiveness, but with quiet hearts finally learning to let go. Because sometimes, the most shocking twist of all is that everyone actually heals. The city rolled into another autumn, soft and golden, the kind of season that made Atlanta look almost tender again. Downtown buzzed with new stars, new songs, and new scandals, but the Frost name had faded into legend. When people mentioned them now, it was with respect. Like they were characters from a story everyone had outgrown but never quite forgotten. Rasheeda's boutique empire had expanded to 3 states. She spent her mornings on flights, her afternoons in meetings, her evenings surrounded by fabric swatches and candlelight. She didn't talk much about the past anymore. Sometimes, when a journalist brought it up, she smiled and said, "It made me tougher." But there were nights when she'd look out of hotel windows, city lights flickering beneath her, and remember that version of herself who thought love could survive anything. Her assistant Nia noticed one evening as Rasheeda stared quietly at her phone. "You good, boss?" Nia asked. Rasheeda blinked back to the present. "Yeah, just thinking," she said softly, "about how far peace had to travel to find me." Nia smiled. "You carried it all the way here." Rasheeda nodded. "Guess I did." In another part of town, Kirk had started running workshops for young artists at a community center. No cameras, no networks, no fanfare, just him, a notebook, and a small circle of kids who still believed in dreams. One afternoon, he finished a session early and sat outside on the steps, watching the sky. His phone buzzed, a reminder from an old contact about the anniversary of the show's first episode. He smiled faintly. "Crazy how time moves," he said under his breath. A car passed slowly down the street, music drifting out of the windows. The song playing was an old track he and Rasheeda recorded years ago, back when everything was bright. He listened until it faded, then whispered, "We really left something behind, huh?" For once, it didn't sting. Jasmine's podcast had grown beyond anything she imagined. She was invited to speak at universities, appear on panels, even host a talk show segment. But what surprised her most was the message she got one night after a live recording. It was from Rasheeda. Short.com. Almost gentle. "I heard your episode. It was brave. Keep going." Jasmine stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "Thank you for hearing me." Nothing more was needed. The world had long since moved on, but the 3 of them were still bound by the quiet echoes of what they'd been through. No bitterness, no anger, just a strange kind of understanding. Pain had turned into memory, and memory into growth. One afternoon, during a local awards ceremony honoring entrepreneurs and community builders, Rasheeda walked onto the stage to present an award for youth leadership. When she looked down from the podium, she froze for half a second. Kirk was seated near the front, surrounded by students from his program. He didn't flinch when their eyes met. He just smiled and nodded once. She returned the gesture and kept speaking. Her voice didn't waver. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and music played low, Kirk approached her table. "You look happy," he said quietly. "I am," she replied. "You seem at peace." He nodded, trying to be. They stood there for a beat, the noise around them soft and distant. Then she said, "Thank you for showing up for them. Those kids need it." He smiled faintly. "Guess I needed it too." Before he could say anything more, someone called her name from across the room. She touched his arm lightly. "Take care, Kirk." He nodded again. "You too, Ray." And just like that, the last piece of unfinished conversation between them dissolved into something simple, something whole. Months later, a magazine released a feature titled Atlanta's Quiet Redemption Stories. The article opened with a photo of Rasheeda at her store, Jasmine behind her microphone, and Kirk with his students. The caption read, "From scandal to strength, 3 lives intertwined by chaos, separated by growth, reunited by grace." The piece went viral, not for its gossip but for its gentleness. People called it the most human story the city had told in years. By winter, life settled again. Jasmine released her final podcast episode, her voice calm as ever. "When I first started telling my story, I wanted people to understand me," she said. "Now, I just hope they understand themselves." The closing music played softly behind her words. Kirk's youth center received its first grant, and the news clip showed him hugging the kids, smiling with something close to peace in his eyes. One of them asked, "Mr. Frost, you think people ever stop talking about mistakes?" Kirk laughed. "Nah. They just start talking about what you did next." Rasheeda spent the holidays surrounded by family, laughter echoing through the house again. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks bloomed outside, she stepped onto her balcony, wrapped in a shawl, holding a glass of champagne. Her phone buzzed messages from fans, from friends, from Carly shouting "Happy New Year, Queen," in all caps. She smiled and typed a caption under a photo of the night sky. "New beginnings don't need explanations." When midnight struck, the city erupted in cheers. Somewhere, Kirk raised a toast with his students. Jasmine whispered a quiet prayer in her studio, and Rasheeda closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Ain't no way I ever thought I'd feel this free." And that was the real ending. Not a reunion, not revenge. Not headlines, but 3 lives finally untangled, 3 hearts finally steady. Atlanta moved on. The world forgot, but peace stayed. And if anyone ever asked about the scandal that started it all, people would laugh softly and say, "It was wild, but they all made it through." Because in the end, that's the part no one expected, how something so messy could turn into something so quietly beautiful. Spring came back to Atlanta with that lazy kind of warmth that made the city hum again. The flowers along Peachtree Street bloomed early, pink and gold against the brick. The skyline still glittered. But something about it felt gentler now, like the city itself had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Rasheeda had just wrapped her newest campaign shoot for the Reborn collection. The theme was transformation: light fabrics, soft colors, calm energy. She stood in front of the camera wearing a long ivory dress, hair loose, eyes steady. The photographer asked her to smile, and she did, but it wasn't for the lens. It was because, for once, the smile was real. When the shoot ended, she sat in the makeup chair scrolling through messages. One caught her attention. It was from Jasmine. "Your new line looks beautiful. Proud of you." Rasheeda stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Thank you. I'm proud of you too." She hit send without overthinking it. That small exchange would have been impossible a year ago. Now, it felt like closure that didn't need ceremony. Carly stopped by later that afternoon, loud as ever, dragging a bottle of wine and 2 glasses into the room. "Girl, do you know how many people still quoting your last speech online?" Rasheeda laughed. "I stopped keeping count." Carly shook her head. "You know you the blueprint now, right? The way you handled that whole situation, the glow-up, the pice, it's inspirational." Rasheeda smirked. "Nah, it's just survival with better lighting." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes easy when the hurt has already healed. Kirk's life had taken on a rhythm that almost resembled quiet joy. The youth center had expanded. Local businesses started sponsoring programs. He no longer flinched when someone recognized him. When parents thanked him for helping their kids, he just said, "I'm paying it forward." One Friday afternoon, he looked out over the studio space filled with sound and energy and realized he hadn't thought about the old scandal in weeks. It was strange, that kind of freedom. Later that evening, he sat alone with a notebook, writing down ideas for a mentorship fund. Halfway through, his phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. It said, "Thank you for helping them. They needed you." He didn't have to guess who it was. He just smiled faintly, whispered "You're welcome," and put the phone down. As for Jasmine, she was back in Atlanta for a short visit. She'd been invited to speak at a conference about healing and accountability. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the audience, hundreds of faces. Most of them women, and said, "Sometimes growth doesn't come from the apology you get, but from the one you give yourself." The crowd applauded. Afterward, a woman in the front row hugged her, saying, "Your story saved me." Jasmine blinked back tears. "Mine saved me too," she replied. That night, Jasmine drove past the old place's streets she hadn't seen in years. She slowed down when she reached the boutique. The lights were still on. Inside, Rasheeda was closing up, laughing with her staff. Jasmine parked across the street for a moment, just watching. She smiled to herself, whispered "You did it," and drove off into the night. Weeks passed. Atlanta prepared for another season of filming for the show. Though it was different now, new cast, new faces, younger stories. But before production began, the network decided to honor the original members with a small tribute dinner. Invites went out quietly. Rasheeda hesitated before accepting, but something in her said it was time. The dinner was held at a rooftop lounge overlooking the skyline. Candles flickered, music played soft, and old castmates hugged and laughed like years hadn't passed. When Kirk arrived, there was a brief hush, but Rasheeda broke it by walking up to him first. "You made it," she said calmly. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. It wasn't awkward. It was gentle. Two people who finally understood that not all endings need to be dramatic. They sat across from each other as everyone shared memories. When it was Rasheeda's turn to speak, she lifted her glass. "We lived messy, we learned loud, and somehow, we came out alive. I'll drink to that." The table erupted in laughter and cheers. Kirk raised his glass too. "To growth," he said quietly. Jasmine, seated a few spots down, echoed, "To peace." The word floated through the room like a blessing. Later that night, after the dinner ended, the three of them found themselves on the balcony, away from the noise. The city stretched below them, familiar, forgiving. Jasmine leaned on the railing. "You ever think about how wild it all was?" she asked. Rasheeda chuckled. "Every day." Kirk nodded. "But maybe it had to happen like that. Otherwise we'd still be those same people." Jasmine looked at him. "Maybe?" Rasheeda glanced between them, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Funny thing about pain, it ages you fast but teaches you slow." A long silence settled, not uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when everything that needed to be said already has been. When they finally turned to leave, Jasmine said, "See y'all around." Rasheeda nodded. "Take care of yourself." Kirk gave a small wave. "Always." As they walked away in different directions, the city lights reflected off the glass buildings around them, almost like mirrors, showing who they'd become: stronger, calmer, realer. Months later, a photo from that night surfaced online, 3 figures on a balcony, blurry and backlit by the Atlanta skyline. No drama, no headlines, no hashtags, just peace. The caption on one fan page read, "They really healed," and that was how it stayed. Rasheeda kept building her empire. Jasmine kept speaking her truth. Kirk kept giving back. None of them crossed paths again, not because they avoided each other, but because the story didn't need another chapter. It had already found its ending. And somewhere deep in the city that raised them, people still used the phrase, "Ain't no way," without even knowing it came from their chaos, proof that even the wildest storms can leave behind calm skies. And that sometimes, the most unbelievable thing isn't the scandal itself, but the peace that follows it. Early summer slid into Atlanta like a warm sigh, soft rain turning the streets glossy and gold in the late afternoon light. Downtown pulsed with its usual rhythm, music leaking from car windows, laughter outside cafes, traffic humming over wet asphalt. It felt like the city had finally made peace with itself, and maybe that was fitting, because everyone who once burned under its gossip now moved quietly through it. Rasheeda woke before sunrise most days now. She liked the stillness, the way the city hadn't yet woken to noise. She'd make tea, sit by her window, and write in her journal before her schedule began. There were no notes about Kirk anymore, no bitterness or longing, just ideas, reflections, gratitude. The pages read like someone who had finally learned how to breathe. Her latest project was a mentorship program for young women starting their own fashion businesses. She called it Rooted. At the first meeting, she stood in front of a group of 20 girls, all watching her like she was something out of a dream. "You don't have to be perfect to be powerful," she told them. "You just have to keep moving through the mess." They clapped, some wiping away tears. Later, as she packed up, her assistant said, "You really changed lives today." Rasheeda smiled. "Nah, they changed mine." Kirk kept his distance, but he watched from afar with quiet pride. The youth center was thriving: new sponsors, more kids, real structure. One Friday night, one of the older students asked if he'd ever thought about producing again. Kirk chuckled. "I do. Just differently. Used to chase hits. Now I'm trying to make people." The kid didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. When Kirk closed up that night, he stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting the music echo faintly behind him, and whispered, "Thank you, God, for giving me another shot." Jasmine had moved again, this time to New Orleans, where she launched a wellness retreat that blended therapy, music, and storytelling. She called it The Calm. The first event sold out within days. The press described her as a voice for women who've survived their own chaos. She gave interviews, but always with the same measured tone. When asked if she still spoke to the Frosts, she said, "We all learned what we needed to learn. That's enough." One night, alone in her apartment, Jasmine scrolled through old photos she thought she'd deleted. There was one from the beach, the one that started it all. She stared at it for a long time, then smiled faintly. You taught me everything, she whispered, and pressed delete for good. Rasheeda's path crossed Kirk's once more that summer, but not by design. It was at a charity gala one she hosted, one he sponsored quietly. She didn't see his name until the night of the event. When he approached her table, she looked up, surprised but calm. You came, she said. Of course, he replied. This cause matters. They talked for a few minutes about the youth programs, the city, the changes. It was easy, almost friendly. When it was time to go, he said, I'm glad you're happy. She smiled softly. Me too. After he left, Rasheeda stood near the balcony, the same one overlooking the skyline she'd looked at so many times before. Jasmine's old phrase from years ago replayed in her mind. Maybe peace was the real ending. She realized it was true. The story hadn't ended in fire or drama. It had simply faded into calm. Weeks later, an entertainment blog published a long piece titled The Frost Story. How Atlanta's most infamous scandal became its quiet redemption. It wasn't gossip, it was a retrospective, reflective, and human. The writer ended it with one line. The truth is, they all grew up. It went viral. Not because it was messy, but because it was healing. People commented things like this, the kind of closure we need in reality TV, and finally, a real evolution. Rasheeda read it on a flight to Los Angeles, closed her laptop, and smiled. They finally got the story right, she murmured. A few months later, she released a small documentary on her channel, nothing flashy, just her sitting in her boutique, talking softly to the camera. I used to think strength meant staying when it hurt, she said. Now I know strength means leaving when it no longer grows you. Her voice was calm, her face serene. In the final frame, she looked straight into the camera and said, Ain't no way I'd trade this piece for anything. In New Orleans, Jasmine watched it late at night and texted her a single word, beautiful. Rasheeda replied, So's your healing. Kirk saw the clip the next day when it started trending. He watched it twice, then walked outside his studio, looking up at the Atlanta sky. He thought about all the years he'd wasted, all the noise, all the hurt, but instead of guilt, he felt something softer. He whispered, You did it, girl, and went back inside to finish helping one of the kids record his first song. By the next year, Rasheeda's brand had gone international. Jasmine's retreat expanded to different cities. Kirk's foundation had helped hundreds of young artists. They never reunited publicly again, but their names no longer carried tension, just history. And Atlanta, that restless city of light and scandal, still remembered. Whenever a new headline hit, people would shake their heads and say, Ain't no way. But this time, it wasn't disbelief, it was respect. Because somehow, against all odds, the story that began with betrayal ended with balance. Not in flames, not in tears, but in the quiet miracle of three people learning that peace was the loudest triumph of all. By the following year, Atlanta had changed again, as cities always do. But it still carried that same restless pulse that lived under the streetlights. Music thumped from passing cars, restaurants stayed open late, and downtown smelled like rain on concrete. The old drama that once owned every headline was now a memory tucked between new trends and younger names. Still, every now and then, someone on social media would post a clip from the past with the caption, Never forget this era. The comments were full of nostalgia, not judgment. That alone meant time had done its job. Rasheeda spent more time outside of the city now. Her calendar was full of conferences, collaborations, and interviews that no longer revolved around heartbreak. Her team had grown, her stores had tripled, and the mentorship program Rooted had turned into a national initiative. She loved walking into a room full of young women wearing her designs, carrying the same confidence she'd once had to rebuild from scratch. Whenever they thanked her, she always said the same thing. Don't thank me. Thank the version of you that refused to quit. One afternoon she sat on the porch of her new home, a quiet place on the edge of town surrounded by magnolia trees. She was reading when her phone buzzed with a message from a reporter. We're doing a 10-year retrospective on the Atlanta reality Iricon. We quote you. She smiled, typed back, only if it's about growth, not gossip. The reply came quick. That's exactly what we're writing about. She thought about it for a moment and added, Then write this piece, looks better on everyone. Meanwhile, Kirk's Youth Foundation had become steady, respected, and surprisingly large. He was no longer Kirk Frost the scandal. He was Coach Kirk, the mentor who helped kids learn the business side of music. He'd wake up early, hit the gym, then head to the center, where his days were filled with studio sessions and life talks. Sometimes the kids teased him, asking about the old days, and he'd grin. Don't make the same mistakes I made, he'd tell them. Learn faster than I did. Late one evening, After locking up, he sat in his car listening to an old Rasheeda track on the radio. It made him smile. He didn't feel regret anymore, just gratitude. The voice beside his once carried anger. Now it carried strength. He whispered, she always had it in her, then turned the volume up and drove off into the glow of the city. Jasmine had found her rhythm too. Her wellness retreat, The Calm, had expanded to 5 cities and a streaming series. Her team filmed her walking through gardens, speaking softly to groups of women sitting under string lights. Her voice had that slow, careful tone that came from surviving something deep. In one episode, she said, healing doesn't mean erasing your story, it means editing the ending. At the end of that year, all 3 of them appeared in the same magazine issue, different features. Same theme. People who turned pain into purpose. None of them had planned it. The editor had simply seen their names as threads of one larger story. The magazine didn't mention the past directly, just hinted at the storm that shaped them. When readers flipped through the pages, they saw 3 portraits that told everything words didn't need to. One evening, Jasmine visited Atlanta again for a book signing. The crowd was small but warm. After the event, she stopped at a nearby cafe and ordered tea. As she waited, a woman approached shyly. You don't know me, but I used to watch the show, she said. Back then I judged you. I'm sorry for that. Jasmine smiled gently. It's okay, she said. I judged myself too. A few blocks away, Rasheeda was finishing a late meeting when she looked out the window and saw rain starting to fall. She thought about texting Jasmine, just a quick "heard you're in town, wishing you peace," but decided against it, not out of pride, but because she knew the peace was already there. That night, Kirk got a call from a producer friend asking him to appear on a reunion project. He laughed. Nah, I'm good. I already had my reunion with myself. As summer settled over Georgia again, a mural appeared downtown near Edgewood Avenue. It wasn't official, just something local artists painted over a weekend. It showed a woman standing in the middle of a storm with her eyes closed, hair blowing, light breaking behind her. Beneath it were 3 words in bold paint. Ain't no way. People took photos with it, posted them online, tagged the old cast. One comment read, "It started as drama, ended as peace. That's growth." Rasheeda saw it a week later while driving through downtown. She pulled over, stepped out, and stood there for a long moment in front of the mural. A small crowd gathered. Recognizing her, someone shouted, "We still love you, Queen." She smiled and waved, then took a photo of the wall for herself. When she got home, she framed the picture and placed it on her office shelf. In New Orleans, Jasmine saw the same photo circulating online. She reposted it with a caption, "Full circle." Kirk saw it too, liked the post, and commented only a single word, "Truth." By the year's end, the 3 of them were in different cities, living different lives. But every so often their paths overlapped in quiet ways: an event, a mutual friend, a shared cause. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was simple, like something that had finally learned how to rest. And in Atlanta, the story that once broke the internet had turned into folklore. People said it softly, with warmth instead of mockery. "Remember when it all started?" And someone always answered, "Yeah, but look how it ended." The city kept spinning, brighter, faster, endless. Yet somewhere under that noise, the peace they built still pulsed steady, unshakable, alive. And now if you've made it this far, you already know this wasn't just a story about betrayal, or fame, or messy love. It was about how even the biggest storms end in quiet. How people fall apart and still manage to rebuild something softer from the ruins. Jasmine, Kirk, and Rasheeda started out trapped in the same headline, but they ended in 3 different kinds of peace, and that's the real twist nobody expected. No screaming, no shade, no grand reunion, just growth. That's what life does when you finally stop fighting it. So here's where you come in. Hit that like button if you felt the shift. If you've ever watched someone rise from their own wreckage and glow harder than before, drop a comment and tell us what part hit you the most. Was it Rasheeda's calm, Jasmine's courage, or Kirk's redemption? Whose story felt closest to your own? Because every viewer watching right now knows a little bit about heartbreak. About trying to forgive people who didn't know how to love you right. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this channel isn't just for gossip, it's for transformation. Every episode, we go deeper into the stories behind the chaos, the lessons hiding under the noise. When you hit that bell, you're not just joining another page of rumors. You're joining a space where pain turns into perspective. We keep it real here. No filters, no rewrites, just raw truth, dressed like reality TV. And think about it. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? If your private heartbreak became public entertainment, would you forgive? Would you fight? Would you disappear? Type your answer below, because your opinion matters in this story. This isn't just their drama, it's every person who's ever been embarrassed, betrayed, or underestimated, and still came back stronger. Watch how the full circle really looks. Remember the first time you saw that beach clip? Remember how it blew up? Now look at them calm, grounded, grown. Life doesn't always hand you closure wrapped in an apology. Sometimes it gives you silence, sometimes it gives you work, sometimes it gives you yourself. And that's enough. To all the fans who've been watching from day one, thank you for keeping the story alive. You turned a scandal into a conversation, and that conversation turned into healing. This channel wouldn't exist without people who see beyond the gossip, people like you, who crave the real message hiding behind the mess. Every view, every like, every share, it all means something. You built this space with us. And if you're watching this right now, thinking about your own version of that beach, your own mistake, your own moment that made the world look at you differently, take this as your reminder. It doesn't define you, it refines you. What looks like the end is usually just the start of your evolution. Rasheeda didn't crumble, she reinvented herself. Jasmine didn't vanish, she healed out loud. Kirk didn't run, he rebuilt. Every one of them is proof that peace is possible even after public chaos. So before you click away, let's make this interactive. Comment the word peace if you felt that energy tonight. Comment growth if you're working on your own comeback. And comment ain't no way if you believe that one day, your biggest heartbreak will be the reason you glow harder than ever. Let's fill that chat with light instead of shade. Let's turn this finale into something bigger than a recap. Let's make it a movement. If you're new here, hit that red button. Subscribe to stay part of the story, because next week we're diving into another chapter of Atlanta drama that nobody saw coming. New faces, new twists, same raw emotion. If you loved how this one ended, wait till you see what's next. And to everyone who's been through something and came out the other side, this is your moment too. Maybe you lost something, maybe you forgave someone, maybe you finally stopped chasing closure. Whatever it is, take a second right now to breathe and know that you made it. Type "I made it" in the comments so the world can see it, because sometimes that's the loudest victory there is. We started this channel to expose secrets, but along the way, it turned into something else, an archive of survival, a mirror for every viewer who ever said, "That could have been me." So yeah, this story was wild. It had love, lies, tears, truth, but what it really had was growth. Messy, beautiful, necessary growth. And that's why you should share this video. Send it to your friends who need to remember that peace isn't weakness. Post it on your story, tag us. Let the world know that love and hip-hop isn't just about the drama. It's about what happens after the cameras stop rolling, because that's when the real story starts. So once again, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your thoughts below. Tell us, did you ever think you'd see a day where Jasmine, Kirk, and Rasheeda found peace instead of war? Ain't no way, right? But they did, and if they can, so can you. Thank you for watching, for listening, for growing with us. Thank you for turning every scandal into a lesson. Remember, chaos fades, but peace stays. This is your host signing off, reminding you that even the wildest stories can end with grace. Stay strong, stay kind, and stay tuned. Because around here, the drama might end, but the healing never does. Now go ahead, like, share, comment, and let's keep this energy going. Because after everything, one truth still stands clear as daylight. Ain't no way we ever going back.